June had great job numbers. Is this a V-shaped recovery? Congressional employment aid update. What's Congress currently doing to help us through these economic times? How to answer the deceptively simple question of, tell me about yourself. That and your questions are all what we're going to be discussing over the next 30 minutes. My name is Tony Martin, and this is Hired How to Get the Jobs Weekly Update. Thank you so much for joining. Again, my name is Tony Martin. If you don't know, I write a blog called How to Get the Job. Feel free to follow me there. Also, take a look over on Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn. Follow me on all those places. I try to put in different content in different locations. LinkedIn and Facebook are more weekly updates with articles and things like that. Instagram is a more casual environment where I try to give daily tips, and I try to do it around a weekly theme or a few weeks. The past few weeks we've been doing emotional intelligence, interviewing traits, tips, things like that. A new theme will be rolling out next week, and I'm not going to tell you what it is yet, but there'll be new themes over there. So if you like this kind of content, make sure you're checking it out in all those locations, and feel free as well to share this with anybody. And of course, my YouTube channel there, check that out, because all of my content, with the exception of LinkedIn, ends up over on YouTube as a catch-all. With that, and today we're for subscribers of YouTube, I'm streaming this live on YouTube as well. So we will hopefully get through it together with no stability issues, but we'll see. Now, let's talk a little bit about the June job numbers. So, as most of you probably know, June had a great month. Job numbers were 4.8 million jobs grown, and that exceeded most analysts, at least all analysts I'm aware of, but most analysts' expectations. Now, to give you some perspective, March, April, and May, overall, over the prior 3 months, we saw a net of loss of 13.3 million jobs. So in 3 months, 90 days, we had seen a net loss of 13.3 million jobs. Over the month of June, we gained back 4.8 million. What does that mean? We saw a 36.1% bounce back from where we were just a few months ago. So that makes everyone think about a V-shaped recovery, and we're going to get to a graph which I think will really do a great illustration of that in a second. But before we get there, I want to talk to you a little bit about industries, because, hey, we're all in different industries as we navigate this world together. So first of all, for office jobs, how are office jobs affected over the last 3 months, and how have they seen a bounce back in June? Office jobs since March, April, May, they lost about 338,000 jobs. They gained back 2 million jobs. They had about a 16.9% bounce back in just the month of June alone. Industrial jobs, they saw a loss of 455,000 roughly jobs over the past 3 months. In the month of June alone, they gained, they had 1.2 million jobs lost over the last 3 months, but in June they gained back 455,000. They gained back almost 38% of the jobs they had lost in the previous 3 months. Retail, we can expect retail to have a great bounce, and it did. Retail numbers, we had lost 3.7 million jobs in April, May, and June, or February, March, April, May. We gained back 2.2 million jobs, which means they almost had a 60% bounce back for retail, which is not a big surprise, because truthfully too, a lot of the unemployment numbers that we talked about earlier, it seemed like temporary layoffs were counted as actual layoffs. So that's why a lot of these numbers came back so much stronger for the month of June. And then construction jobs and healthcare jobs. Construction, they had seen about a 407,000 jobs were lost in the 3 months prior to June. In June, they gained back 158,000, which means they had a 38.8% bounce back. And lastly, the healthcare. Healthcare, how can healthcare, for goodness sakes, how can healthcare lose jobs during a pandemic? But they did. They lost almost 1 million. They lost 814,000 jobs in the 3 months prior to June, but in June they gained back 358,000. They bounced back 44% from where they were. What does that mean? That means that we're going in the right direction. And frankly, how does healthcare lose jobs? That is pretty, when you stop doing all elective surgeries, when you have people that don't show up for appointments because they're afraid of catching COVID-19, you know, those things like that really affected the job numbers for healthcare, and that's why there were so many layoffs or temporary layoffs or furloughs, whatever you want to say. But let me show you a graph, because this graph I think will really illustrate the point best. Oh, sorry, I always hate doing that. And we can dismiss that. All right, so this graph and this is from the labor statistics, U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, okay, so you know where it's coming from. You can see here, for 2 years, we barely cracked 4%. We were below 4% unemployment. Great numbers. Then March hits, and then April we start reporting on March numbers, or excuse me, I said May we start reporting on April numbers, and you see a little bit of a spike up here, but then boom, May, huge loss, millions of jobs lost, and now actually that's April, millions of jobs lost, then May, and now June. So this does certainly look like a V-shaped recovery. However, now if I had to put my crystal ball together and if I had to predict something, I suspect that as the summer continues to warm up and as we continue to live our lives, July will have good numbers, hopefully somewhere around here, maybe 10%. And then I would say August are going to have good numbers, maybe about 9%, but then I would not be surprised if we kind of plateau at 9% for fall as we try to figure out how COVID-19 is going to affect our economy. Now, if you haven't noticed before, I've always talked about how these unemployment numbers are calculated. It's through surveys, and here's just household surveys. They do 60,000 surveys every single month, and that's how they figure out the unemployment numbers. It's not just simply figuring out who's getting benefits. So a couple of months ago, or about a month ago, I did a show on that. Feel free to listen to the specifics on the unemployment numbers and how they're calculated. But just know that we are doing our best to look back in time to figure this stuff out, and we're not always accurate with how we do it when we're basing it on surveys and things like that. So let me pull off of that. There we go. So with that, that's kind of where we are now. There's some good news behind all this, okay? With these numbers, what do we got? We got New York, who is not seeing another spike, mainly because so many people already got it, it would appear, that they're kind of starting to do the herd immunity naturally. And now California, which is interestingly enough, never opened up still. They're still closed, but they are seeing spikes. So it's not just so simple as saying, well, this state opened up and this state didn't, and they're seeing a spike and they're not. No, there's so much gray area here. It's all about how we as a individual group culture in each parts of the country respond to this thing. But hopefully we can continue to get back to work in a safe manner so that everybody on here can benefit from that. So next we're going to talk a little bit about what Congress is doing. Then again, we're going to get to a lesson on how to answer the simple question of tell me about yourself, because we talked about it last week briefly, but I really want to dive in this week, and then we'll take your questions and answers. So again, if you have any questions, get those queued up in the comments, and I'll make sure that when we get to that Q&A in about 7 more minutes, we're talking about it. But just so you know, also, neat little feature. LinkedIn started a feature where if you don't know how to pronounce someone's name, there should be a little speaker that person can put next to their name on LinkedIn. You click on it and it'll actually pronounce their name correctly. Now, personally, I've always thought that was kind of silly because I think if you have a tough name, you know it's a tough name. And I have never felt embarrassed or ashamed saying, hey, just so I don't offend you right away, is it this or that? So, but with that, bottom line, be aware, LinkedIn is making it a little bit more friendly to reach out to people you don't know by saying their name correctly. Now, what's Congress doing? I will post this over on my Instagram. So if you don't follow my Instagram, but you want to see the government tracker for .us, which has all of the bills that are currently in the House and the Senate, go over there, check it out. I'll post it by the end of the day today. But in June, I talked about 2 bills that were currently in the House. One was called the Bill Worker Relief and Security Act. That was a Democratic bill. Then the other was the Republican bill, which is Reopening America by Supporting Workers and Businesses Act. Both of these bills were introduced in June, and both of these bills have not progressed. Shocker, because we live in a world where everything has to be uber complicated and we can't get anything done regardless of what side of the aisle you're on. But that's where we are right now. So I will continue to track this. And if you think you're an expert when it comes to this stuff, let's talk, because maybe it makes sense getting you on this program so we can educate everybody together in a much more conducive environment than just me speaking. But truthfully, I'm looking at it right now. There was a bill introduced in July 2nd, but that's more for nonprofits and helping them with cash flow issues. But everything else was June 1st, June 1st, June 1st, and May. And all of them have a 2% prognosis, which either means they're only 2% of the way through the process, or they have a 2% chance of actually passing. Now, when you click on them, None of them are out of committee yet or even into committee yet. So they're really just really good talking points for our legislative bodies to be able to bloviate where they currently are and their current issues, but only a few of them have any co-sponsors as well. So that's where we are with that. Now, tell me about yourself. That's our question that I really want to talk about today, because we all, I talked a little bit about it last week when I was addressing how to answer questions before they're asked. Now, you do that with tell me about yourself for sure, but really tell me about yourself is your chance to sink or swim. And so this question, this answer should be a chance for you, one, to control the story, okay? And if you are giving this answer to 3 different people on the same day, so you go in at 9 o'clock in the morning, you have an interview with HR. Sarah from HR asks you, tell me about, why do you choose this role? Tell me about yourself. And then Joe, who's the manager, says at 10 o'clock, the hiring manager says, hey, tell me about yourself. And then Sharon, the VP of the department, at 11 o'clock says, tell me about yourself. I don't expect you to have the same answer at 9, 10, or 11. I expect you to have a different answer. Now, I don't expect the bones of that answer to be different, but I do expect the substance, meaning it's always going to be your qualifications. Why are you interested in working for this company, and what makes you qualified to work in this company, and why are you passionate? However, each person that you're speaking with has a different concern. They have a different reason to ask you that question. Perhaps the VP is really worried about the culture and the budget and figuring out how to make sure that you build the strategy and build the team. Maybe the manager cares about KPIs and current operation statistics, and that recruiter you're talking to just cares about if you're going to be a good person working with other people. So you need to realize that each person that you're speaking with has a different motive that they're trying to draw from you from that one question. And when you know that and you can realize that, you can start speaking specifically to them, so you're not just a broken record giving a 2 to 3 man answer that sounds the exact same regardless of who's in the room. It's almost like House of Cards. I don't know if you ever saw that show, but the very first episode of season 1, Kevin Spacey is in a room with a bunch of people, and he's going through point by point what each person's agenda is in that room. And then you can see throughout the way the show unfolds how he actually interacts with those individuals based on what he wants them to see. It doesn't mean that you need to be somebody different, but it does mean you control the narrative and you control what you want them to see of you, and you control that you can empathize with their position. So know your audience, okay? Go on LinkedIn. Check each person you're going to speak with out on LinkedIn. Find a reason to connect with them, even if it's just being a joke. Nobody wants to hire a robot either, right? We want to be able to hire someone that we can get along with. So if you're an Aggie and they're a Longhorn, make a joke. Say, hey, tell me about yourself. Well, my name is Tony Martin, and I'm not either one of these, by the way. So I'm not claiming allegiance to one school or the other, but just for the example, my name is Tony Martin. And I went to UT, and I realized you went to A&M, Sharon. So I'm not even sure you're going to want to hire me, but I am open-minded. So, make a joke like that. Show that you can be a person. Nobody wants to hire a robot. So build a connection, know your audience, make sure you can understand their struggles. So after I say who I am and why I'm looking for this job, then I can say, and throughout my career, I've dealt with budgets, and I'm talking to Sharon. I've dealt with KPIs and making sure that I've increased performance of my team. I'm talking to the manager. Or if I'm talking to the recruiter, my second sentence might be more about, and I'm a team player who really cares about affirming those around us and building a team up. And I love working with other groups, the departments, and mentoring them and bringing them up. Whatever. But that second sentence that I just said 3 different ways and 3 different answers is all part of that same question. It just depends on who's asking the question. So know your audience, control the narrative. Then don't talk about things that aren't relevant. Again, make sure you know who you're talking with, and they don't care that you grew up in Arkansas or Houston or whatever. Stick to the points that they care about. Okay, they have a finite amount of time to talk to you. Make sure you're relating to them to what they care about. Don't give yourself an opportunity to shoot yourself in the foot by talking about medical conditions or barriers to hire you. And what I mean by that is sometimes I'll often hear, well, I'm a single mom. You have just given a recruiter, by saying that, even if the recruiter is a single mom, even if the VP is a single mom or the hiring manager is a single mom, they know how difficult it is to be a single parent. They know how difficult it is to balance the priorities of the company, their job, and their family. Don't, even though you're trying to relate, give them a reason to go, huh, are we going to be really 100%, is she going to be 100% committed to our company, or is she going to be busy doing other things? Make sure that they know that you're committed to the company and that you're committed, and don't give them reasons to think otherwise. Lastly, be aware of your inflection, be aware of your body language. Little tip about me, or little unknown fact about me. I used to do stand-up comedy. Now, I wasn't a big name. I have a self-made DVD in my living room, which my wife is embarrassed if I had ever insinuated on showing anyone she knows, because I think it's funny, but she doesn't. And that's okay. We all know she's wrong. But either way, I did a show one night. And on Friday night and Saturday night, it was the same 15 minutes because I was opening for somebody. And it just happened to be recorded both times. So on Friday, I did my material, same timing, same comedic timing, same everything. The whole audience was with me every step of the way. Everybody laughed. Saturday, I do the same material, same everything, same comedic timing. The audience never laughed. And frankly, I felt some animosity, like they didn't like me at all. And we always, as comedians, would say like, oh, that's just a bad day with the audience. And there is some truth to the audience actually not being there that day or whatever. But the truth is that often it's my ability to, or my inability to connect with those in the audience. I didn't do it well. And here's what I realized. I actually watched a video. I watched the video of the first Friday night, and then I watched a video of myself on Saturday night. And Saturday night, I made an errand, or an error in judgment, making a statement that nobody thought was funny. And when I looked back, I realized why nobody thought was funny, because I came off like a jerk. I said something about someone showing up late or something like that. And at the end of the day, the moment I did that, I realized that my facial expression wasn't smiling. It wasn't joking. It was actually more serious. And as a result, I managed to trigger, to use a word of today, most people in the audience probably to go, oh, he's a jerk. We'll keep it clean. And they just shut down. For the next 15 minutes, it was pretty much, let's get this guy off the stage. So when you're interviewing, realize facial expressions matter. More so than ever now that we're on Zoom and doing everything else remotely, right? But make sure that you smile. Make sure your body language says confidence. Make sure that you're not discouraging the person you're speaking with by talking about things that maybe they wouldn't be sure they can trust you with, or whatever. So hopefully those all help, but that's really tell me about yourself. There's a lot more detail behind it that I can always get into, but I think that's probably good. So now let's get to the Q&A. This is a time, if you have any questions, if you've had questions and you want to ask them, feel free to bring them up. I will make sure that I answer live questions first, because I always prioritize live questions, but I always have one queued up too, ready to go. So let me first answer. Russ in Clear Lake this week asked me, and I go through client questions that I've helped clients through that I thought were beneficial for everyone else. But Russ in Clear Lake this week asked me, how and when should we follow up after an interview? And should I do it in email or LinkedIn? So my advice is that if you've just finished an interview, hopefully you've gotten everybody's business cards. If you've gotten everybody's business cards, the very first thing you're going to do when you get home is send everybody an individual email. Start with the recruiter. And if you do phone interviews and you've only talked to one person on the phone, after you're done with that phone interview, that phone screen, send that person an individual email. So after every step, within 24 hours, send everybody an email that you've spoken with in the previous process. And it should be an individual email. It should not be the same email. Thanks so much for your time. I'm looking forward to next steps. It can open and close with that, but it should be something in the middle about thanks so much for your time. And then I really understand the problem you're experiencing with this. And like we said, I think I'm uniquely situated or qualified to help you through that challenge. So you send every single person the email, thanking them for their time, explaining that you understood what they said, not long, total of maybe 5 sentences at the most, finishing up and look forward to hearing from you. Here's the second thing you do with that email. You've sent one to the recruiter, thanking her or him for their time. Now you CC the recruiter on every single one of those follow-up emails, because like I've always said, your recruiter is probably your #1 advocate. Believe it or not, they probably have the least amount of authority, but the most amount of power in your hiring process, because they are the only person that's guaranteed to have talked to every single candidate. So by you CCing them on that communication, they're now becoming slowly an advocate for you. And they realize that you're not just sending one email out to everybody and blasting their team. You're taking the time to, and I've been in those discussions where I sit with the hiring manager and I say, you know, I really like Richard because Richard, he sent you, Mary, an email. He sent you, Joe, an email. He sent you, Steve, an email. And I was CC'd on them as you saw that, but it was a different email. He sent me one too. He really seemed to understand what you guys were talking about. Now, maybe I'm wrong because I wasn't in your conversations. And they'll all go, no, that email was spot on by Richard. He absolutely spoke exactly what we were talking about. It was really relevant and timely. So that's great. So make sure that you do follow up. Now, whether it's LinkedIn or Facebook, or not Facebook, but LinkedIn or email, I'm a big believer that if you've met them face-to-face and they've given you a card, you do it on email. If you've had any communication with them via email, then absolutely you do it on email because you already have a chain there where they scheduled your interview and you say, okay, I'm coming in. Then you just pick up on that and you respond to that. If you don't have their email address, then you go back to your recruiter and say, hey, I never got so-and-so's email address. Can you please forward this to them? It might be intentional, it might not be, but either way, you can always ask for permission to get their email address as well. And you can usually figure it out because it's not like these naming conventions are super complicated. But sometimes Tony can be Anthony, in my case, so maybe you go to T.Martin, it's the wrong person. So bottom line, but that's kind of how you do it. Whether it's LinkedIn or email, whichever one you've been communicating on is the one you should continue to communicate on. And often LinkedIn's a little bit more casual. So I might go to LinkedIn if I hadn't yet talked to them, or if I was meeting them or trying to set up an interview, then that's a different question. But that's kind of where I go. All right, next question that I got this week was from Mike in Texas. How far back should a resume go with experience? And this is a really good question, Mike. I get this question a lot, and here's why. Because we all have years and years of data. And we don't necessarily know what does the employer care about, what don't they care about. Now, truthfully, if you're networking and you're just sending out resumes to network with people, it is difficult, if not impossible, to know what's relevant and what's not. Better to err on the side of being a little lengthy if everything is written in a structured, well-written way. But if you're applying to a specific job, the first thing you do is you look at that job description, you look at your resume, and you match them up. And you look and you see what experience you have in your past, which is the most relevant to that job. And if the experience you have from 14 years ago is more relevant than the experience you had 2 months ago, well, then you better go back at least 15 years. If the experience you had 20 years ago is more relevant, then you need to highlight that experience 20 years, even though you might skip over some of the deeper experience from 15 or 14 years ago. So what that looks like is you have your professional summary on the top. As we all know, I'm a fan of professional summaries more than objectives. Then we go into our chronological experience where we got our most recent experience, a lot of information, and then maybe from 15 years ago, it's just a one-liner with one bullet about what that job is. And then you can break into the 20-year ago experience where you do maybe 5 or 6 lines because it's most relevant. Now, that's kind of a lazy way to do it, to be honest with you, because it doesn't take as much effort to just remove stuff in between, but it does look a little funky if you have 6 or 7 bullets from recently and then 3 or 4 bullets and then 1 bullet and then all of a sudden 7 bullets randomly on page 2 from a job 20 years ago. I would much rather in these scenarios move into a functional resume format over a chronological. If you don't know the difference, I've done many videos on functional and chronological and these types of Q&As. And a quick shameless plug here. If you like the Q&A format of all these types of videos, go over to the YouTube channel, just skip ahead 15 minutes and just start watching from the Q&A. Often people don't want to hear the lesson or whatever, or they don't want to hear the current, because guess what? The current's changed, right? Current June numbers are not going to be relevant in August. So feel free to skip ahead and go to just the last 15 minutes so you can hear all these questions, because I think it's probably the best use of all this information. But with that, make sure that whatever information you're highlighting in the functional format will really let you highlight the most relevant information regardless of when you got it. So chances are, if it was a really long time ago, you're probably going to move into a functional resume. And if you need help doing that, let me know. Send me your resume. We can do a free chat where I can help talk to you a little bit about how to format a resume into a functional way versus a chronological way and the pros and cons based on your specific situation. All right, we got about 5 more minutes. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask live. I'll answer them. Cheryl from San Antonio. How do you answer the question, what are you looking to make? Now, this is a question I get all the time, and I love answering it because it's a fun question for me because I get to riff for a little bit. So truthfully, now look, rule 1, And we all know I hate absolute statements, but rule one, mostly right, don't ever give a range. Don't ever say I'm looking for somewhere between 90 and 110 if you want $100,000. Tell them $100,000. The reason why is me as an employer, when I hear a range, you will, no matter what you say for the range, I'm hearing you will take $90,000 to $100,000 or $110,000. So why would I give you 110 if you're going to accept 90? If you give a range, if you just feel comfortable like giving a range, because some people do, make it as small a range as possible. Somewhere between 97,000 and 102,000. Do that, but don't give the 90 to 110. Don't give a 23% range and expect to get the $110,000 a year value, because it just doesn't happen that way most of the time. So don't give a range. Second, you don't say this is what I'm looking to make, even though the question is asking you what are you looking to make. You answer the question with numbers and statistics to back up those numbers. So how do you get those numbers? You first go to payscale.com, salary.com, Glassdoor, Indeed. Go to those 4 websites. There's different search engines where you can search what salaries should be in a certain region for a certain job, even in a specific company, if the employees of that company have actually inserted the data, and often they have. So you already get an indication, and you'll get 4 different, hopefully not competing, but hopefully 4 different pieces of information that'll kind of give you an azimuth or a spot to be. So here's what I'm saying. So you might get, wow, this is probably terrible here. You might get salary.com gives you this line. Oops, gives you this line. Indeed gives you this line. Payscale gives you this line. And you are somewhere. From all that, you can figure out that little dot right there in the middle, which is 100,000, is probably your right number. Now, if you were a celestial navigator, that would make some phenomenal sense to you, because that's what we did all day long. But if you're not, that chart was probably the worst chart ever. But bottom line, you'll get 4 different pieces of information, and they should all coalesce around something. So here is how you answer that question. What are you looking to make? What is your compensation requirements? Once you've done your homework, which you should before you go into the interview. And the question to answer is something like this. Look, Sarah, I've done a lot of research, and from what I can tell, this job seems like it should be paying somewhere about $100,000 a year. From what I can tell, that seems reasonable. That's it. Now, Sarah has been satisfied with the need for a number, even though you never actually answered the question. You never told her what you're looking to make, and you never told her what you would accept. So you haven't left any money on the table. You have just said, I think the job should pay about $100,000. Now, hopefully this will respond, like Sarah know that now she can respond and say, you know what, Tony, the job actually pays $90,000 a year, not $100,000. Oh, okay, well, let me ask you a couple more questions, because maybe my research is off. Again, now you're solidifying that I never actually said I was looking for 100. I just thought the job should pay that, but let me recalibrate my expectations. Or she says, yeah, you're within range. Great. Either way, you haven't disqualified yourself. So now let's see what happens a month later. A month later, you get the job offer, and the job offer is $100,000 a year. Do you have to take it? No. You know why? Because you never said you were. And it gives you a real comfortable point of negotiation. So you get the job for $100,000 a year. You can easily respond to Sarah and go, Sarah, I was really hoping for 110, but you said 100 a month ago. Well, no. I said I thought the job should pay 100 a month ago, but since then, I've now learned that the P&L responsibility is $1 million, not 500,000. I learned that I had 7 direct reports, not 2 direct reports, and my whole team is actually 27 people when I thought it was only 15. The job scope is much bigger than what I thought it was, and I've learned that by talking to Sarah, to talking to Joe, talking to Mike, and you could even pinpoint what each individual said to validate why you're coming back. Because again, you don't get the offer and say, what do you think? You get the offer and you have a couple days to think about it. So you can think about it and come back to her that night with your nice point-by-point rebuttal. But that allows you then to negotiate, and you can still take the 100,000 because maybe it's the best they can do. But it at least gives you the chance to come back with more, because you can say, look, you've learned a lot more about me over the past month, and I've learned a lot more about you over the past month. And I think that this, and this is reasonable. Now, again, maybe you're wrong, but at least by answering it that way, you have never boxed yourself into leaving money on the table or having to answer the question having to take the salary that's given to you and feeling bad about it because you misled somebody. All right, so with that, I'm gonna do one more quick question. Don't see anything live today, so no worries there. One more quick question from Andre in Brazil. I got this question yesterday after the LinkedIn video. How best to apply for expat roles, and our company's hiring them right now? Now, I am not an expert when it comes to expats. I've hired a lot of expats in my lifetime, but I'm not in every company right now. But what I can tell you right now is we certainly have, when you have unbelievably high unemployment, it is not a recipe for expat offers to come in to work in the US or work in other countries often, because all countries around the world are feeling the same exact thing right now. And whenever you hire an expat as a company, you have to justify why this expat is getting hired over a local national, whether they be a US, Canadian, Nigerian, I don't care. You have to justify why you're hiring an expat. And when there's millions and millions of people unemployed and looking for work, there are potentially a lot more people that can actually do that job versus an expat. So expat opportunities are going to be nil, at least until unemployment drops. Now, I'm not saying if you don't have a unique skill. Maybe if you have a very, very unique skill, then there's still an opportunity for you, but you have to seek those out. They're not going to be so easy to come by. So just hopefully that helped Andre a little bit. And with that, again, thank you so much for watching. If you like this, please share it. Please send it to anybody in your network you think might be able to benefit from it. Please be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel so you can get all of this content as well as everything else. Be sure that you're on our Instagram. I will make sure that I post that governmenttrack.us article over there on Instagram. But make sure that you're following the different platforms. And as always, if you need help, reach out to me so I can help show you how to get the job. Thanks so much. I'll see you next time.